event, how is like the line between fictionalizing stuff and bringing in real life people and their names and involving all that?
That's an interesting dilemma because you have like real life people that are involved who might be still personally invested and affected by it. So it all goes back to that thing like time heals all wounds, right? It's like that old cliche, and it kind of really is true. Like let's look at the most recent thing we're talking about here. It was a fictionalization of a real event, right? So Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? That was a fictionalization of a real event. Manson family murders actually happened. Sharon Tate, all that stuff, that all actually happened. But he made it like how we would want it to end, with these people not being murdered that way, right? So it's the same. Like some of these people are still alive that were in those films, but with time, whatever hurt they might have felt closer to the event has dissipated, and then you have more freedom and more leeway to explore those dynamics, right? Dynamics between the characters, and whether you want to put those dynamics on them yourself, or because you don't really know these people, right? You just kind of know of them through various stories, but you kind of project on them what you think they should be like, or however they should be like, based upon the situation. So with time, you're able to do that with more leeway, because like I know 10 years ago, if someone says, hey, remember when you did that? You're like, kinda, but then they'd be able to put more detail on it necessarily than I would, because it wasn't something that I remembered, but they did. So with them, they ingrained those details in their memory, and they kept it there. Whereas I, who was actually involved in there, it wasn't so effective on me, so I didn't decide to store it. You know what I mean? Yes.
How do you develop your own writer's voice? And I'm sorry, it might be two questions in one, but
Fire away.
how do you develop your own writer's voice?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe within that, how do you avoid starting every sentence with the word the? Because I find myself doing that when I try to write.
Okay, so I know what you mean. So the whole writer's voice thing. So I don't know. Everyone has a different process for writing, right? So I know Ayn Rand, who was a philosopher, like she did detailed character sketches, right? Like this person was born to these people on this date and whatever, right? Every one of her characters were like that. And then you have Stephen King, who's kind of like, he goes, yeah, I'm gonna write about Bob. And then Bob comes alive as he writes the story, right? I'm kind of in between that, right? I have a general idea of my books all start out with just a scene in my head. It's like maybe a 5-minute scene plays out in my head, or whatever it is, a flash or whatever. And then a whole book comes from that, if I find the scene interesting, right? So it's one of those things where, because it's such a personalized thing for writing, it's kind of hard to give advice, because what works for me might not work for you. But what works for me, anyways, is that I get out of my own way, right? So I go, this is my character, and I start writing about them, and all of a sudden, I'm not there anymore. Like I'm kind of like floating over my own shoulder, watching this other person go through the actions in my book. Like that's kind of how it feels for me. And then sometimes, when one of my multiple kids run by, I'll come out of it, right, and be like, oh, okay. Then I have to go back into that zone, right? But for me, I let the characters themselves write themselves. But obviously, I'll have my own style, right? Like my own distinct narrative, like the way I write a narrative, or the way I bring pieces together. Because I do points of view. I don't do first-person writing. I might play around with that later on, but right now I haven't. It's just always different points of view, sometimes viewing the same event. So you see different perspectives on the same event, and it kind of makes it more interesting. So you can see, well, this person saw this and felt this, but watching the same event, this person saw this and felt this. So it's good because we're all different, right? So then it kind of brings more realism to the scene, because you get different perspectives on the realism itself. And sorry, what was this